Hey there, Buford Middle School students. This is Mrs. Wilborn again. We're continuing with our study of geometry, still in Unit 5, and we're in the second part. Recently, we've been talking about angles and different angle relationships, and so now we're going to take some of that knowledge that we've learned and extend it toward triangles. So that's kind of our next part of this geometry lesson. So we're in Lesson 2. This is about triangles, and have your guided notes out, have your pens and pencils and highlighters, and make sure you're in a quiet place ready to sit down and listen. This should be a relatively short video. If you're not quite there yet, pause the video, grab your materials, and then come on back and get started. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about is classifying triangles. And there is basically two ways that we can classify triangles. We can classify triangles by their angles and by their sides. And so might be a good idea to grab your highlighter. This is going to be the vocabulary part of your notes, and we do have 9 vocabulary words. 6 of them will come right from this screen. All right, and so the first way that we can classify triangles by their angles is called an acute triangle. And an acute triangle has 3 acute angles. So it would be a triangle, a 3-sided shape, you all know that, that has 3 acute angles. A second type of triangle that we can classify by its angles would be a right triangle. And a right triangle has 1 right angle. So you'll notice the little box there. And let me get my mouse over here. And so again, this little box indicates it's a right angle, and specifically 90 degrees. And so our triangles, our right triangles, will have 1 right angle. And then finally, an obtuse triangle is the third way that we can classify triangles by its angles, and that is when we have 1 obtuse angle. So it's a triangle that will have 1 obtuse angle, and here would that angle be. Okay, if I'm moving too quickly, go ahead and pause the video and copy these 3 vocabulary terms down, and then you can hit your unpause and you can join back in with us. Alright, the second way to classify triangles is by its sides. And we have 3 different classifications by its sides. The first one is an equilateral triangle. And this is a triangle that has 3 equal sides. So every side is the same length. And the little hash marks here, or dash marks, are indicating that each side is the same length. So these symbols, we're going to talk more about these symbols in a little bit, but knowing these symbols and what they represent is going to be real important. The second type of triangle is an isosceles triangle when we're talking about its sides. And an isosceles triangle has at least 2 equal side lengths. Okay, so notice again the markings, the little hash marks. You have 2 of them. That indicates that these 2 sides are of equal length. And then finally, a scalene triangle. And this is a triangle that has no equal side lengths. So no sides have the same length. Again, pause your video if you need to so that you can go ahead and make sure you get all the definitions down, all the important parts. Okay, a couple more vocabulary terms for you. We have interior angles and exterior angles. So let's talk a brief moment about interior angles. I'm going to grab my Inner-Right pad, so let me get this going for you. Interior angles are the 3 angles of any triangle inside. Right, so let me kind of show you on the diagram down here. So if I wanted to look at this diagram, I could say that this is angle 1, I could call this angle 2, and I could call this angle 3. Alright, so the inside angles, inside the side lengths, are called interior angles. Now there's something special about that information and knowing that. And so this is something that you're going to have to jot down. And so grab your pencil or pen and make sure you write this in here. All right, and you may already know this, but just in case, this is really important, and this is helpful to solve some problems. So the sum of the interior angles of a triangle always equal 180 degrees. Alright, so essentially what I could do is I could write, a simple equation that would represent this. And I'm going to write it up here. You should write it on your paper. I'm going to say angle 1 plus angle 2 plus angle 3, since that's how I've named them, equals 180 degrees. Okay? Alright, the exterior angles are the angles that are on the outside. So if I were to extend any one of these side lengths, and I could, if I could extend any of these side lengths, I would have an angle. I'm going to change my color here so you can kind of see. I would have an exterior angle. So this right here is my exterior angle. Okay, it's an angle that is extending outside the closed plane figure of a triangle, and it is outside, and it's extended from one of the side lengths. Okay, and what happens is this, when I extend these side lengths, I can form angles that are adjacent and supplementary to the interior angles. So for example, this distance right here, okay, and if I went back and let's say I called this angle 4, I could say that angle 3 and angle 4 are adjacent. I should write this down. Okay, and since they're adjacent, that means next door, they're next to one another, they are also supplementary. Alright, and so if I knew the value or the degrees of any of these angles, I could figure out the other one. Also, we know that angle 3 and 4 form a straight angle, and that's a vocabulary term that you've used before. So we know that this is 180 degrees. Okay, congruent parts. Let's talk a little bit about congruent parts. And this is where we're going to go back into those important markings. Alright, just as congruent angles have the same measure, congruent sides of a triangle have the same length. And so if you recall, we showed you some of the special markings in the definitions, the very first slide. And we talked about these hash marks. Alright, and so what these hash marks tell me is even though I do not see the side lengths, because this has one hash mark and this has a matching hash mark, I know that these two are the same length. Alright, I can say the same thing about these angles. Because I have an arc here and a matching single arc here, then I know that these two angle measures are exactly the same. So even though I don't see the measurements, by looking at the markings and matching the markings, I know that they are the same, which again means congruent or equal. Alright, so let's look at an example here. And the example asks us to find an angle measure in a triangle. Alright, and we have a given triangle, and we know, let me try and scroll it up for you a little bit, we know a little bit of information. Alright, we know two of the angle measures, and we're missing a third. Alright, and so just as we said before, that all triangles, the interior angles of all triangles equal 180 degrees. So I could write a simple equation. Right, and I could say 26 degrees, this angle here, plus my 83 degree angle here, plus x, my third angle, is all going to equal 180 degrees. Alright, and now I can just go through and use what I know about solving equations. right? These are like terms. So if I were to add these two together, I would get 109. And so I'd have 109 plus x equals 180 degrees. And now I could use what I know about solving equations, inverse balance solve, and I would find out that x equals 71 degrees. So the value of this angle right here is going to be 71 degrees. Alright, so now example 2 wants us to find the measure of an exterior angle. So let's look at that as well. Talked about those terms, so let's go through and look at those. Alright, well, I do know that I know the 3 inside angles here, and I'm looking for this exterior angle. Alright, and what I do know is that because these two angles, the angle that's 35 degrees and the y, are supplementary, that they have to equal 180 degrees. They're adjacent, and adjacent angles are supplementary, so they have to equal 180 degrees. Alright, so I could use the same principle. I could say 35, this is just one way to set it up, plus y equals 180 degrees. Alright, this is just one way to set it up. You can set it up lots of different ways. Alright, and now I would use what I know about solving equations and inverse balance solve, and I would find out that angle y equals 145 degrees. Okay, so this distance right here, whoops, that's a 4. Sorry, y'all, I'm just going to cross it out here. 145 degrees. Alright, so this isn't hard. This is pretty simple stuff, but just important information to know about triangles. Alright, and lastly, we have classifying angles by its angle measures. And what I have here is I have a little planting hook. And if I look at the triangle, if I'm tracing the outline, the triangle that the planting hook is made from, and I look at it and I notice that I have this box, which we know is a 90-degree angle. And because it has one 90-degree angle, it's going to be a right triangle. So I could classify this planting hook triangle as a right triangle because of this one right angle. All right, so go ahead and jot that in on your paper. All right, guys, well, that's pretty much it. Pretty short one today. You got a couple your turn questions, 6 of them to be exact. So go ahead and answer those, and I think you can solve that on this paper. I think there's enough room. These are not going to be long equations or anything. So go ahead and just show your work. Make sure that you are, making sure all your scratch work is there, and your teacher will review these tomorrow. Don't forget to jot any questions down that you may have. Have a great night.